Greetings and welcome to In-Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. The National Climate Outlook Forum for the wet season 2024 took place on May 21, and we're very happy to speak with meteorologist Gary Benjamin. He joins us now to break it all down. How you do, Mr. Benjamin?
I'm pleased to be here once again, as always.
Definitely our pleasure to have you. Now, even while the forum was going on, someone came on. I know you're hearing a lot of jargon, so let me start to state it a little more simply for you. But in terms of the takeaways, or even before we look at the takeaways, let me ask about the dry season. Thank you. And what has been happening? Are there any things that you would really have noticed and say, okay, well, that's something that we need to keep a little eye on going forward? So we start with the end of the dry season, going into the wet season outlook. Thanks.
Okay, the dry season has been one which was hot, dry, and dusty. Although we had a little bit punctuations, I say, of heavy showers in a few areas, but mainly hot, dry, and dusty. And it started off especially so in the beginning of May. And as May is progressing towards the end, we are seeing a bit of increase in atmospheric moisture. So it appears that the rainy season would be with us soon.
And it's interesting sometimes when you have the factors come together, because hot may be one thing, dry may be another thing, dusty may be another thing. But when you add some of those factors together, do they add, or do they form something a little different? So hot and dry, but not dusty. How is that different from hot, dry, and dusty?
Well, when we talk about dusty, I'm talking about particularly the Saharan dust. And of course, when you have dry conditions, you have all sorts of particles entering the atmosphere, burnt particles, when you have fires. So dusty mainly is the dust that has been whipped up from the ground. Whether there is dust or not, you could have rain and you could still have the high heat, because one of our heat season peaks is in fact in the rainy season. And dry, of course, is limited precipitation.
Thank you so much for that, because it's interesting the way that people say, okay, well, I don't mind the heat. They see that dust different. And sometimes that would cause different levels of water usage because people are trying to get rid of the dust. So it is very interesting to me, the way that all of these things combine. But let's move to the 21st of May, please, in terms of like that forum, that outlook. What are some of the things that were really brought to the fore in the forum? Thanks.
Well, after we spoke about the dry season, which was particularly dry, and as I said, it's beginning to get a little bit moist. What really comes out of it is that all the climatologists and meteorologists in the region who are responsible for predicting the hurricane season are saying that it is going to be above normal, above average hurricane season or cyclone season, as far as the development or the numbers of cyclones that are expected to develop.
And what are some of those factors leading to the development of cyclones or hurricanes, Mr. Benjamin?
Well, this year we looked at three factors that we would look at. Is the state of this global phenomenon called the ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, which we hear about all the time. And it is transitioning from El Nino. We're still in a weak El Nino phase, and we have expected it to go into a neutral and then into La Nina. We look at the positioning of those phases and the strength also. We look at the sea surface temperatures, especially those across the equatorial Atlantic. And we look at what is called the Atlantic meridional mode. That is to say the gradient in temperature between the North Atlantic and the southern parts of the Atlantic.
And I want to go back to the fact that you spoke of meteorologists and climatologists. Where are some of the places that these professionals would have hailed from to add to the content of the forum?
The main one would be, of course, under the aegis of WMO, which is in Miami, they are responsible for looking over, as far as under WMO, what is happening in our region. And we also have the ever popular AccuWeather and the Colorado State University. Those are the three that I've known over the years who I would look to predicting the hurricane season amounts.
And the fact that you talk about looking to these people, I just want you to reiterate because you've said it already, but speak to the level of accuracy, the level of trust that the first organization that you called would have in the Met Service of Trinidad and Tobago, because they would actually be using a lot of the content and output from the Met Service to formulate and to go into some of the predictions and forecasts that they are giving us.
Within the region, every bit of information that we develop or whoever has the information that has standard bits of information and data is passed through to, well, it is shared among all of us. And each one of us have different authorities and responsibilities. And of course, Miami have the great responsibility of going over the whole of region for all over the North Atlantic and the Caribbean and looking for, so to speak, to see the developments as far as cyclones and waves and disturbed areas are concerned. But all of us have an input into those products because we are under one big body called the World Meteorological Organization, and we are in Region 4. So it is a great coming together of minds, of information, and transfers of technologies, and anything that we could possibly do with each other to enhance our ability to predict the weather in this part of the world.
And many times now, at this point in time, currently, when people talk about Colorado State, you quicker hear people talking about football and Coach Prime. But in terms of coming out of the seasonal forecast, I think it was about 23 main storms. So do you have those breakdowns in terms of Colorado State, AccuWeather, and some of those predictions?
Yes, let me first deal with AccuWeather or Colorado State. I'll deal with them. Colorado State is saying that there is going to be approximately 23 storms and 11 hurricanes, and 5 of which would become major hurricanes. So, and the normal for our part of the world, for the Atlantic, is normally 14 named storms, but they are saying 23. We normally would, on average, would have 7 hurricanes and 3 major ones. So they are predicting way above that amount, the average amount over the last 30 years. The AccuWeather predictions, they usually give a range, and they are ranging it between, while Colorado State is saying 23, they are ranging it between 20 to 25 named storms, 8 to 12 hurricanes, and 4 to 7 major hurricanes. And when you look at the two predictions, you see where they correlate with each other, strongly correlate with each other. And what they are saying, basically, even if you don't get the numbers, they are saying they are going to be way more than normal storms expected to form in our part of the world.
And I keep on going to ask how you come about that. So what are some of those things that would help to give an idea of potential intensity of storms, Mr. Benjamin?
Well, we look at what is in normal over the years. We look at analogous information for years with particular information about them, see how they played out. We also looked at the 3 factors which I spoke about, which is the state of the temperature of the water, the El Nino factor. We also looked at the meridional mode between the North Atlantic and the southern parts of the Atlantic. And when we put all those factors together, especially the ones that are analogous to different types of years, you get a good idea, a very good idea of the type of seasoning you're likely to have. And other climatological factors could come into play to tweak it, and they would say whether it's 23 or 24. But of course, whether you say 23 or 24, I'm repeating, is a great number that is expected more than the average of 40. And our mantra over the years has been, it takes only one. So the more storms that are produced, that means the probability of one occurring on our land increases.
And on that somber note, we take a short break. We are speaking with meteorologist Gary Benjamin. We return to this conversation after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are speaking about the weather. We are speaking about the forecast. We're doing so with meteorologist Gary Benjamin. And Mr. Benjamin, we spent a little while speaking about potential storms, expected storms. We closed the first half of the conversation on that note of preparedness. We didn't talk about precipitation though. So I want us to focus this half on that a little bit. Thank you.
Okay. Well, from all intents and purposes, we are looking at least in the first half of our rainy season, that is June, July to August, that we would have near normal to above normal amounts of rainfall. So we're looking at sometimes wetter than usual conditions in certain places. It's going to be vary in different areas. But let's take, for instance, June. June is expected to be mostly wetter than usual this year, with a 42 to 63% chance for western areas of Trinidad and eastern areas of Tobago to be wetter than normal, and all the other areas to be mostly around normal. And when we look at the first half, that is June to August, we see that we have wetter than normal conditions in many areas of Tobago, most of Tobago, and also for the western part of Trinidad and some eastern areas of Trinidad. Now, as we go down to the second half of the rainy season, which is from September, October, November, and December, we find that it's going to be more closer to normal. But even if it is closer to normal, there are areas in those same places in the western areas of Trinidad and the eastern areas of Tobago, where the normal would be a little higher, so to speak, or the near normal percentages would be a little higher than the rest of the islands.
And I'm glad we're able to be speaking about this now, because it also makes me want to ask the question, and let me know if I'm overstepping bounds or if this is a conversation for another day or another time or another person. But sometimes I wonder, how quickly do these reports get turned into suggestions or conversations with bodies like Works and Transport, Rural Development, Local Government, and other policy agencies, so that they can be informed to say, okay, well, it looks as though these are some of the things that we can be ready for. Let us try to organize. So even if that final decision is not taken in terms of the policy or what action, how things are going to be implemented, what does that conversation look like in terms of, like, this is the content, this is the information that we have. Here you are. Do with it what you will.
Well, I have found over the years, and even in recent times, even more so, that the important stakeholders, not that anyone is less important than the other, but the stakeholders in the position who can make those decisions, they really get our information as soon as possible. For instance, some of them were invited to the NCOF, and as soon as the NCOF were going on, they could look at it, and also they would be emailed the information. And I have found that they work on it pretty well. They are very intelligent people in those areas, who also understand the weather to a certain extent also, so that we pass it on to them as soon as possible. And yes, they do work on it. Yes, they have their plans in operation, and sometimes even before it comes out to the general public, we would have conversations with them at different levels, because they are the persons who would, how I should put it, who would tend to activate the first responder bodies. So they could have, or at times would have, information beforehand that would help them to put things in place in order to alleviate any situation that might occur.
Okay, and I think, and that conversation and that question and that answer in no way absolves us as in individuals of doing what we're supposed to do in terms of trying our best to keep waterways and things clear. Because I know sometimes people may say it's just a bottle or it's just a this or it's just a that, but the cumulative effect is definitely something that we can look at, and then we're looking to see, well, who dealing with this? Them supposed to deal with this, but we's part of the them. And like you said, there are different levels of responsibility, but everyone is responsible. And
Everyone is in fact responsible, yes. And if you look at the trash, the debris that you look in the canals and the waterways after a deluge, after flooding, you will realize it's personal items that is in fact in those waterways.
And so we spoke a little bit about rainfall, precipitation. Looking from month to month, are there areas that you would look at, or are there other parties, stakeholders that you will have conversations with saying that flooding is likely here because this level of rainfall was normal or a little above average, but because of the type of material that is found in this area, there may be ponding, there may be certain things that we need to look at. What does that look like, Mr. Benjamin?
Well, each one of the disaster management units would or should have an intimate idea of the topography around the area they are responsible for. They know the rivers, they know the waterways, they know the elevation of the land, so to speak. They would have an understanding, sometimes even more so than a meteorologist in an office, that when they see rain set up, what is likely to happen. But there are areas which more than likely is going to see flooding occurring, especially in the areas of the plains. And we have mapped out this for this year. Most areas in the plains of Trinidad, the western areas of Tobago and the eastern areas of Tobago, and some areas on the windward side, known areas that would flood. There are many areas, as soon as rain falls, you get the street flooding, which runs off rather quickly. But there are known areas, and in Tobago, they are moderately high risk of flooding, but in Trinidad, the risk in certain areas, especially certain plain areas around the river basins, the risk of the flooding would be, of course, greater. And they are aware of that. They would have our information. As I say, some bodies would have even river measurements, river level measurements that even we, the Met Office, look forward to looking at and to be able to make predictions.
And with that, we have about a minute more. Is there anything that you want us to come away from this conversation, really bearing in mind anything that I didn't ask, but you want to share? I just wrap a bow on the conversation. Thanks, Mr. Benjamin.
Well, I want to continue with the idea that we are all responsible. It's not just an idea, it's a reality. We are all responsible. Every little bit of trash counts, every little bit of debris that we throw. In the dry season, we throw a cigarette butt. We could have acres burnt down. In the wet season, any little bottle we have, when we look at the cumulative effect, it is said that we all live downstream. You throw a bottle in the canal here, it reaches the river sometime and blocks it and causes flooding. Somebody upstream to you does something, it causes flooding. We are all responsible. So even if the information is onto, or the DMUs and the responsible bodies have the information, you are also required to seek out the details of that information, understand where you are living, and practice good behaviors that would keep our whole environment clean and safe, and even mitigate against the extent of flooding that we could likely have.
Meteorologist Gary Benjamin, we want to thank you so much. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, this has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.